I still tell people it happened because it was cold. That's the clean version. The one I repeat when I don't want to unpack everything that followed. The truth is, the cold was just the excuse we both needed. It was late October, one of those weekends where fall pretends it's already winter. We were staying at a tiny cabin upstate, cheap, badly insulated, and booked last minute because neither of us wanted to be in the city. Just two friends escaping noise, work, expectations. Or at least that's what we called it. His name was Ethan. We'd known each other for almost 3 years by then. Met through mutual friends, drifted into each other's lives slowly. Same humor, same taste in movies, same habit of staying up too late talking about nothing important. He was straight, or at least that's what I'd always assumed. Dated women, talked about ex-girlfriends, complained about dating apps like every other guy I knew. And me? I was openly gay, but careful. I'd learned early not to let hope wander where it wasn't invited. The cabin had one bedroom. We laughed about it when we arrived, standing in the doorway with our bags still on. One narrow bed, thin mattress, a single window rattling from the wind. Well, Ethan said, dropping his bag. Guess we're closer than I thought. Relax, I joked. I don't bite. Unless asked. He snorted, shaking his head. You're impossible. We decided one of us would take the bed, the other the couch. Fair. Logical. Very adult. I ended up on the couch, wrapped in a blanket that smelled faintly like dust and old wood. The heater clicked on and off, never quite committing to warmth. By midnight, the temperature dropped hard. I woke up shivering, my teeth actually chattering. I could hear the wind outside, whistling through gaps it definitely shouldn't have been able to find. I pulled the blanket tighter, but it barely helped. From the bedroom, I heard Ethan groan. Are you freezing too? He called out. Just a bit. I lied, staring at the ceiling. There was a pause. Then footsteps. The bedroom door opened, and he stood there in sweatpants and a hoodie, hair messy, eyes half asleep. This place is a joke, he muttered. I can see my breath. I sat up. I'm fine, really. Go back to bed. He hesitated, then shrugged. You sure? Yeah. Another pause. Longer this time. His eyes flicked to the couch, then back to me. I mean, he said slowly, we could just share. Just for warmth. Like survival mode. I laughed. Too quickly, right? Very Bear Grylls of you. I'm serious, he said. We'll build a pillow wall or something. No weird stuff. There it was. No weird stuff. I should have said no. I knew that. I felt it, that quiet warning in my chest. But I was tired. Cold. And part of me was curious in a way I didn't want to examine too closely. Okay, I said. But if you steal the blanket, I'm pushing you off. He smiled. Deal. We crawled into bed fully dressed, back stiff, leaving an awkward gap between us like the mattress itself was nervous. The heater clicked off again. The cold crept in anyway. Minutes passed. Neither of us slept. I could feel him shifting, inching closer without admitting it. At some point, his arm brushed mine. We both froze. Sorry, he whispered. It's fine, I whispered back. Another stretch of silence. Then he exhaled, slow and deliberate. You're warm, he said. I swallowed. You're not exactly an ice cube yourself. He laughed quietly, and that tension eased just enough for him to move closer. Not pressed against me. Just closer. Our shoulders touched. Then our legs. It shouldn't have felt like such a big deal. But it did. Because once we stopped pretending it was accidental, everything changed. And lying there in the dark, staring at the ceiling while the wind rattled the window, I realized something terrifying and undeniable. I didn't want the morning to come. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I started to drift off, I became too aware of him beside me. The steady rise and fall of his chest. The warmth where our shoulders touched. The way his knee kept brushing mine, not accidentally, not anymore. At some point, the pillow wall we joked about quietly ceased to exist. I don't remember who moved first. I just remember realizing that his arm was now resting across my stomach, heavy and solid, like it had always belonged there. My body reacted before my brain could catch up. I went still, afraid that if I moved, the moment would shatter. Is this okay? He murmured, barely louder than the wind outside. I turned my head slightly, just enough to see his face in the dim light from the window. His eyes were open, not sleepy, not distant, watching me. Yeah, I said, my voice softer than I intended. It's okay. That should have been the end of it. A simple acknowledgement. A boundary quietly respected. Instead, he pulled me closer. Not fast. Not desperate. Just enough that my back fit perfectly against his chest. Like we'd done this before. Like our bodies knew something we'd been avoiding. I could feel his breath against the back of my neck. Warm. Steady. Too intimate. We stayed like that for a long time. No talking. No pretending to sleep. Just breathing together, synced without trying. My mind was screaming questions. Was this still about the cold? Was this comfort? Was this curiosity? Or was it something we'd both been circling for years, finally cornered by a broken heater and a too small bed? Can I ask you something? He said quietly. Yeah. He hesitated. I felt it in the way his arm tensed slightly around me. Do you ever get tired of being the honest one? I frowned, confused. What do you mean? He exhaled through his nose. You don't hide who you are. You don't pretend. I've always admired that. There it was. Not a confession. Not exactly. But close enough to make my chest ache. I didn't always, I said. I just got tired of lying to myself. His thumb moved, tracing a small, unconscious circle through the fabric of my shirt. My breath caught, and he noticed. Sorry, he said quickly. I didn't mean to dash. It's fine, I said again. That word was starting to mean something else entirely. He was quiet for a moment. Then, softer, I don't know what I'm doing. Neither do I admitted. That earned a quiet laugh. Nervous. Relieved. But, he added, I know I don't want to stop. Neither did I. I turned slightly, enough that we were facing each other now, noses almost brushing. The space between us was so small it felt charged, like static waiting for contact. I could see the conflict written all over his face. Want and fear tangled together. He wasn't drunk. He wasn't confused. That somehow made it heavier. If this is a mistake, he said, tell me now. I searched his eyes, really looked at him, and made a decision that scared the hell out of me. It doesn't feel like one, I said. Does it feel like one to you? He shook his head. Slowly. No. That was all it took. He leaned in, stopping just short of my lips, giving me time. An out. I didn't take it. The kiss was gentle, almost hesitant, like we were both afraid of breaking something fragile. But the moment our lips touched, something in him shifted. And me too. It wasn't about heat anymore. It was about honesty. And once we crossed that line, there was no going back to pretending we were just sharing a bed because it was cold. The kiss didn't last long. Not because it was wrong, but because it was overwhelming in a way neither of us was prepared for. We pulled back slightly, foreheads resting together, breathing uneven. I could feel his heart racing against my chest, matching mine beat for beat. Wow, he whispered. I let out a shaky laugh. Yeah. For a moment, neither of us moved. Like if we stayed perfectly still, we could keep the world from catching up to us. The wind howled outside, the cabin creaked, and it felt like we were suspended in this tiny pocket of honesty. Then reality crept in. He leaned back just enough to look at me properly. Really look at me. Not like a friend. Not like a guy sharing a bed because it was cold. Something deeper, heavier. This changes things, he said quietly. I nodded. It does. He swallowed. I don't even know what this makes me. I didn't rush to answer. I'd learned the hard way that labeling someone else's feelings for them never ended well. It doesn't have to make you anything, I said. Not tonight. He considered that, his thumb absent-mindedly brushing my jaw. That small touch sent another wave of warmth through me. Nothing to do with temperature. I like this, he admitted. I like you. More than I probably should. My chest tightened. You're allowed to. That earned a small, almost relieved smile. We settled back down, facing each other this time. No more pretending. His leg rested loosely near mine, natural and unforced. His hand settled at my side, like it had found a familiar place. The silence wasn't awkward anymore. It was full. Can I ask you something else? He said. Sure. Have you ever wanted this? His voice was careful. With me, I mean. I hesitated, just for a second, then decided I was done lying at least tonight. Yes, I said. I just never thought it was an option. He let that sink in. I could see it on his face, the recalibration. Rewriting memories. Replaying moments with new context. I think, he said slowly, I've been pushing this away for a long time. I didn't gloat. I didn't say I knew it. I just listened. I told myself it was admiration, or comfort, or that I just liked how easy things were with you. He shook his head softly. But lying here? Kissing you. He exhaled. It feels right. Those words hit me harder than the kiss had. I leaned in again, slower this time, and he met me halfway. The second kiss was different. Less hesitant. still gentle, but sure, like we were both choosing it now. When we finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine again. "We should probably sleep," he said, though he made no move to let go. "Probably," I agreed. Neither of us did. Eventually, exhaustion won. He tucked me closer, chin resting against the top of my head, arms secure around me. I listened to his breathing even out, felt his body relax as sleep finally claimed him. I stayed awake a little longer, not because I was cold, but because I knew that when morning came, pretending was no longer an option, and I had no idea whether that terrified me or thrilled me more. Morning came quietly. No alarm. No sudden jolt back to reality. Just pale gray light slipping through the thin curtains and the sound of the wind finally dying down. For a few seconds, I didn't move. I didn't open my eyes. I just let myself exist in the warmth. His warmth. Ethan's arm was still around me, loose but certain, his hand resting low on my back like it had never known another place. My head was tucked under his chin, his breath warm against my hair. He was still asleep. I could tell by the way his breathing was deep and unguarded. For a brief, selfish moment, I pretended this was normal, that this was how we always woke up. Then he shifted, not pulling away, just adjusting. His hand flexed slightly against my back, fingers curling like his body was checking to make sure I was still there. I felt his breath hitch when he realized I was. He didn't move away. Neither did I. "Morning," I said softly. He exhaled, half laughing, half groaning. "Morning." We stayed like that for a few seconds longer than strictly necessary. Long enough that it was a choice. Then reality nudged us again. "So," he said, voice rough with sleep. "Last night wasn't a dream, right?" I tilted my head just enough to look up at him. His eyes were open now, clear, a little nervous, very awake. "No," I said. "Definitely not a dream." He nodded slowly, processing. I could almost see the thoughts lining up behind his eyes, each one heavier than the last. "I don't regret it," he said quickly, like he was afraid silence might say it for him. "Just figured I should say that." Something loosened in my chest. "Me neither." That seemed to settle him a little. He relaxed back into the pillow, though his arms stayed firmly around me. "Can I be honest?" he asked. "Always." "I'm scared," he admitted. "Not of you. Just what this means." I didn't try to minimize it. "That makes sense. But I also know," he continued, quieter now, "that if I'd woken up alone, I would have been disappointed." That confession landed softly but deeply. I swallowed. "Same," I said. We lay there, talking in fragments. About how long he'd been questioning things without admitting it. About moments he'd brushed off. Feelings he'd buried under labels that felt safer. About how easy it was with me, and how that ease had started to scare him long before the cabin ever did. There was no dramatic declaration. No promises. Just honesty, stripped down and vulnerable in the early morning light. Eventually, he sighed. "We should probably get up before I fall back asleep." "Probably," I agreed. Still, neither of us moved right away. When we finally did, it was slow and reluctant. We got dressed in silence that felt thoughtful rather than awkward. Made bad coffee in the tiny kitchen. Sat at the small table, knees brushing, pretending not to notice while noticing everything. Every glance lingered a second too long. Every accidental touch felt deliberate. And when we packed up to leave, loading the car under a pale sky, I realized something else, something just as terrifying as it was hopeful. Sharing that bed hadn't just broken the pretending. It had opened a door neither of us knew how to close. The drive back to the city felt different than the drive up. Not quieter. We still talked, still joked, still argued about music like we always did, but there was an awareness between us now. Like every word carried a second meaning underneath it. Like we were both testing how much of last night could exist in daylight. He drove. I watched the road slide past the window, the trees thinning, the world slowly returning to normal. At one point, his hand rested on the gear shift a little longer than necessary, and without really thinking about it, I placed mine over it. He stiffened, then relaxed. Neither of us said anything. He didn't pull away. I didn't either. It was small, almost nothing, but it felt louder than any conversation we'd had all morning. When we reached the city, reality finally caught up to us properly. Traffic, noise, phones buzzing with missed notifications, responsibilities creeping back in. He parked outside my building and turned off the engine. "Well," he said, forcing a casual tone that didn't quite land. "Thanks for not letting me freeze to death." I smiled. Anytime. We sat there for a moment, neither of us making a move to get out. The air felt heavy again, but different from the night before. Less fragile, more uncertain. So what happens now, he asked. I appreciated that he didn't say what are we. Just now. That depends, I said carefully. What do you want to happen? He stared at the steering wheel, jaw tight. I don't want to pretend nothing happened. My heart skipped. Okay. But I also don't want to rush into something I don't understand yet, he added. And I don't want to hurt you. That mattered. More than he probably realized. I'm not asking you to have everything figured out, I said. I just don't want to be a secret you're afraid of. He looked at me then. Really looked at me. You're not, he said firmly. I swear. I nodded, letting that settle. Trust didn't come instantly, but honesty helped. Then we take it slow, I said. We talk. We don't lie. And if it gets too much, we say so. He let out a breath, like he'd been holding it all weekend. I can do that. Before I got out of the car, he reached over and squeezed my hand. Not rushed. Not hidden. I'm glad it was you, he said quietly. I smiled softer this time. Me too. That night, lying alone in my own bed, the silence felt strange. Too empty. I replayed everything: the cabin, the cold, the kiss, the way he'd held me like it was instinct. My phone buzzed. Ethan, you awake? I stared at the screen, then typed back. Mia? 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Ethan, I can't stop thinking about last night. I smiled into the dark. Me, neither can I. And that's when it hit me. Sharing a bed because it was cold had been the beginning. But what came after the texts, the honesty, the choosing each other even when it was complicated, that was the real warmth. And I had a feeling things were only going to get harder. And better. The next few weeks were strange. In a good way. Mostly. Ethan and I didn't suddenly become something overnight. There was no dramatic shift, no announcement, no labels slapped on what we were doing. But things were different in subtle, undeniable ways. He started finding excuses to be around more. Coffee accidentally, turning into hours-long conversations. Movie nights that ended with us sitting too close on the couch, shoulders pressed together like it was the most natural thing in the world. Late-night walks where our hands brushed just enough to feel intentional, but not enough to draw attention. In public, we were careful. Too careful, maybe. He still wasn't ready for anyone to see us, and I understood that even if part of me wished it were easier for him. But in private, when it was just us, the walls came down. One night, about a month after the cabin, he came over looking exhausted. Long day, I asked, handing him a beer. Long identity crisis, he muttered, collapsing onto my couch. I laughed, but there was an edge of truth in his voice that made me sit beside him instead of across the room. You okay? I asked. He stared at the TV without really seeing it. I told my ex I'm not dating right now. She asked why. I didn't know what to say. My chest tightened. Did you lie? He shook his head. I said I'm figuring things out. That felt like progress. Still scary. Still fragile. But honest. He turned to me then, eyes searching my face. Does this feel like enough to you? I thought about it. About the way he still hesitated to touch me when we were out. About how careful he was with words. About how, despite all that, he showed up again and again. For now, I said, yeah, as long as we keep moving forward. He nodded, leaning closer. His knee pressed against mine. Familiar. Comforting. I don't want to lose you, he said quietly. You won't, I replied. Not unless you push me away. He didn't respond with words. He leaned in and kissed me soft at first, then deeper, surer than before. There was no panic this time. No pulling back. Just warmth and want, and something steady growing between us. Later, tangled together on the couch, his head resting on my chest, he traced idle patterns on my arm. You know, he said, half smiling. If the heater hadn't broken, none of this would have happened. I smiled into his hair. I don't believe that. Yeah, he asked. I think we were already halfway there, I said. The cold just stopped us from running. He was quiet for a moment. Then, softly, I'm glad it did. So was I? Because somewhere between shared glances and stolen kisses, between fear and honesty, we'd stopped pretending entirely. And I knew whatever this became, it was real. The first real test came when someone else noticed. It was a Friday night at a friend's birthday, loud bar, dim lights, too many people packed too close together. The kind of place where everyone's a little drunk and a little observant in ways they don't admit. Ethan showed up late, sliding in next to me with that familiar ease, like my side was already his. We didn't touch. Not really. Just stood close. Close enough that our arms brushed when we laughed. Close enough that I could feel him there without looking. At some point, my friend Mark leaned over and said, "You two always this inseparable?" It was casual, offhand, but I felt Ethan stiffen beside me. I didn't look at him right away. I answered first. "Guess so." Mark raised an eyebrow, smirked, then shrugged and turned back to his drink. No interrogation. No big moment. Just an observation thrown into the air. But Ethan was quiet after that. When we stepped outside for air, the night was cold again, sharp, familiar, almost ironic. He shoved his hands into his jacket pockets, staring down the street. "I froze," he said finally. "Not because of Mark. Just the idea of being seen." I nodded. I felt it. He glanced at me, searching my face for disappointment. He found honesty instead. "I'm not mad," I said before he could ask. "But I need to know we're moving towards something, not circling it forever." He swallowed hard. "I know." We stood there for a long moment, breath fogging between us. Then, without looking around, without making a show of it, he reached for my hand. Public, simple, defiant in its quietness. "I don't want to hide you," he said. "I'm just still learning how not to hide myself." That was enough. Not perfect, but real. Later that night, back at my place, he held me like he was grounding himself. No rush, no doubt, just presence. "I don't know where this ends," he admitted, forehead resting against mine. "I don't need to know," I said. "I just need to know you're here." "I am," he said. And this time, I believed him. Because the pretending, the careful distance, the excuses, it was thinning, cracking under the weight of something stronger. And for the first time, it felt like we weren't just reacting anymore. We were choosing. Winter came properly after that. Not the playful, early cold that had pushed us into the same bed, but the kind that settles in and stays. Short days, long nights. The kind of season that makes you honest whether you want to be or not. Ethan came out slowly. Not with a speech. Not with a label. Just truths, shared one person at a time. A friend. A sister. Eventually, a casual, "I'm seeing someone," that turned into a name. Mine. The first time he said it out loud to someone else, not just me, I felt something settle in my chest. Not relief exactly. More like alignment. Like the world had finally caught up to something we already knew. One night, months later, we went back upstate. Same cabin. Same narrow bed. This time, the heater worked. We laughed about it, standing in the doorway again, bags on the floor. "So," he said, grinning, "guess we don't have an excuse anymore." I stepped closer, slipped my arms around his waist. Good thing we don't need one. That night, we shared the bed without pretense. No space. No hesitation. Just warmth that had nothing to do with temperature. Lying there in the dark, he squeezed my hand. "You know," he said, "I used to think that night was an accident." I turned toward him. And now I think it was the first time I stopped running. I kissed his shoulder, smiled into the quiet. "We didn't share a bed because it was cold," I said softly. "We shared it because we were ready." He pulled me closer. Yeah, we were. And for the first time in a long time, the future didn't feel terrifying. It felt open and warm.